Tuesday, December the 22nd. I want to start off by wishing everybody a Merry Christmas. The weather, it's been absolutely gorgeous the last 4 or 5 days. You know, this time of year I only do probably 1 or 2 trips a week, but I get to do a lot of fun fishing. I've got to spend some time upper end of Bull Shoals, Taneycomo, and Table Rock. But as far as Table Rock, the lake level's right at 914, about a foot below normal pool. And water temperature's anywhere from 51, 52 degrees. Now, a lot of the fish on Table Rock, you know, it's probably the deepest I've ever seen them, you know, for quite some time, and so many of them, the bait and the fish. A lot of them I'm catching are out there in 60, 70 foot of water. Now, a lot of them were back in the creeks. A lot of the bait was, but the last week or so, I'm finding a lot of that shad where I was fishing in the center of the guts and in the creeks. I'm having to move more out towards the main lake or the main river arms. It depends where I'm at. But there's still some bait back in the creeks, but I'm finding more fish out there with the shad, kind of way out in the middle of nowhere. But a good sign, a good way to find them is just keep an eye out on the birds. Now, a lot of times you will find big schools of shad without the gulls and the loons around them. But if you're driving down the lake and you see loons and birds out in the middle of the lake, stop and idle around and, you know, see where your bait is. There's usually going to be fish underneath them. A lot of the areas I'm catching fish, I don't have to have the bait. And there's some places seems like there's almost too much bait. I mean, there's acres and acres of shad. And I'm seeing shad down there in 60 to 80 foot, but I'm also starting to see some shad up higher in the water column in that 10 to 15 foot range. And I've been getting a few bites on a jerkbait in the Alabama rig, and I'm hoping as the water gets colder, that bite should get a little better. There has been some fish up underneath the shallow bait, but the majority of the fish I've been catching have been really deep. I've cut a dead shad here. You'll catch a fish and they'll be belching out they're really little tiny shad, only about an inch, inch and a quarter long. And a couple different ways. When you get a school fired up, I don't think it matters what you drop down there. You can drop a silver spoon, a white spoon, ice fishing jig, a little swim bait. But when they get finicky, it seems like a couple baits that are working the best for me is the ice fishing jig. And I'm throwing where's it at there? The 5/8 ounce one. And I'm not giving the bait a whole lot of action, almost just shaking it, just like a drop shot. But you'll find when you get into these big schools of shad, especially if you have live scope or, you know, on the Garmin, if you see a hole in the middle of the shad, the reason there's a big hole there's fish feeding in the middle. So if you can pitch a bait into that hole, it's almost, you know, guaranteed bite. Otherwise, it seems like you got to get to the edge of the schools of shad or underneath them, and you can actually see the fish underneath them a lot of times. Some places the shad is so thick that your electronics, you know, it might show you that it's 40 or 50 foot deep, but it's actually 80 or 90 feet deep because the shad is so thick your sonar won't shoot through them. Some of the fish I've been catching above the shad, some below. You just have to spend a little bit of time. But one thing that's kind of crazy I found, you know, I tried a little swim bait, and where I'm fishing so deep, I had to find some 3/8 ounce heads that had a small hook. The reason I felt like I needed a small hook, I've been throwing a real small bait. It's a Super Fluke Junior. Big Bite also makes one that's real similar to it. But the reason I felt like I needed the small hook was because the bait is so small. If I didn't have it, like my regular 3/8 ounce jig has got a lot longer shank hook, and the shorter shank hook just fits in that smaller bait, makes a lot more compact presentation on the bait. But, you know, it seems like if I fish something with a paddle tail, I can't hardly get bit. Now, like I said a few minutes ago, if you get into an aggressive school of fish feeding, I don't think it matters what you're dropping. You can tell when you get around them because it'll look like spaghetti or worms on your graph, the fish coming up and down. But when they get a little finicky, the ice fishing jig, and this is a 3/8 ounce head. I went into Extreme Outdoors the other day looking for, the problem is normally you get a 3/8 ounce head, it's got a bigger hook, but they had some over there, and this was a big bite, and it's got a little 2/0 hook, and also they had some Rapala made one as well that was a little flat deal with an eye on it that had a small hook in it that I think will work good as well. But I'm using the 3/8 because it just takes a 1/4 ounce or 3/16. Just takes so long to get down there in that 50, 60 foot range. And with this bait as well, I'm trying to keep it, I can find the isolated fish and keep it just above the fish and just shake it a little bit. Also, if I see something on my live scope, individual fish or areas where the shads broke up, you can cast this into it, watch it go down and work it through that area. I've been catching a few fish on a crankbait. That's been working real well if you can find them. They're really hard to find right now, but it's a Spro Rock Crawler 55, and it's called Stone Cold. It's got a little blue belly on it, a brown back. Just about everybody in the area from Mountain Home to Bentonville, Arkansas, everybody's out of them. It was a special color, and I'm sure they'll have some more coming out, but I've also been bit on a red craw as well. But the crankbait bite hadn't been real consistent. The most consistent thing has been the deep fish. Now, if you can't find the bait or you're having trouble getting bit around the bait, go to some of your spots that you normally fish in the wintertime. Normally would be fishing 35 to 45 feet deep, but go to them same spots and back out a little bit deeper. A lot of the areas and points that are working better for me are ones that got a channel or almost like an underwater bluff in, where it's got a channel that comes up against one side, and I'll just go back and forth on the edge of the drop. And like I say, I've found very few fish in that 20 to 40 foot range. Most everything I've been catching's 40 to 60 to 65 foot. Now, like I was saying earlier, with the schools of higher, with the schools of shad being up a little higher in the water column, if I can find them around some boat docks or when the wind picks up, if they get over some cedar trees, I've been able to catch some Norman flake, McStick, and I don't know what this one is called for sure, but a blue bandit will work as well. But this got a darker blue back, a little orange on the belly. Seems to work really good on the clear days and the clear water. The Norman flake, I usually like it. It's a solid color. I like it if the water's got a little bit more stain to it or if it's cloudy. And my jerkbait bite's been a lot like my crankbait bite. I don't think there's a ton of fish up there in that water column, but there's definitely some quality fish. And kind of what's crazy about a lot of the deep fish is the Kentuckys have been, 35 to 50, and a lot of the fish that I'm catching in 60 to 70 have been primarily largemouth and smallmouth. Like I said, I don't know if I've ever seen this many fish this deep, this time of year. A lot of times you'll see it when the water gets down in the, low 40s, but it's been kind of a strange year ever since that thermocline broke up. October was, for the most part, early November was pretty tough fishing. I think a lot of the reason is apparently there's good oxygen in that water down there at 60 to 80 foot, because there's a bunch of bait and fish. We've actually caught white bass down in there at that depth, crappie mixed in with the bass, and even some catfish. So, it looks like the weather is going to cool down a little bit, but it's still unseasonably warm for this time of year. So if you get a chance over the holiday break, you need to get out and do some fishing. And, Sportsman Factory Outlet closed down about a week ago, but Boat Works should be open in their tackle store probably sometime the first or second week in January. Just keep an eye out on their Facebook page. but it's right off of 65 and Chestnut. Look for them to be open probably in about 2.5 to 3 weeks. So till next week, good luck, good fishing.